Let's do this. All right, and we are live.
Oh my God, we're live. Hello, everybody. My name's Dei.
And I am Ben.
And we're extremely happy to welcome you to our very first Day in Nature live show.
Yay!
Yay! In our live shows, we are going to talk with top performers, climbers, coaches, and anyone worth learning from. And you guys will be able to ask anything you want.
Well, almost anything.
Yeah.
And the topic for today is your favorite thing in the world.
The fear of falling. And we are extremely honored to have our very first guest, who is an expert in this area and a legend of climbing, Hörst. So for those who don't know, Eric is one of the most famous climbing coaches in the world, and now he's climbing for 40 years, and he's well known for his book, Training for Climbing. Being in his 50s, he is now still red pointing 513s and can easily do one-arm pull-ups, which is pretty amazing.
Sometimes.
Admit it. So welcome, Eric. Welcome to our show.
Hey, great to be with you, Dei and Ben. Thanks for the kind introduction. And, I'm kind of an over-the-hill climber at age 53, but, I've been in this sport a long time, and I've been coaching and studying and writing about it for a long time. So I'm certainly happy to share my expertise with you guys and with climbers around the world. That's the beautiful thing is climbing brings people together. And that's one of the reasons I'm still doing what I'm doing is I love climbing, and now I enjoy coaching climbing as well.
So you have been climbing for so long. Do you ever have fear of falling?
Of course, fear is healthy. Fear is what keeps you alive. So, of course, what I tell climbers like Dei is your goal isn't to get rid of the fear of falling. Your goal is to learn to manage the fear of falling. And more importantly, learn to recognize when that fear is useful, like warning you of truly dangerous situations where you might get hurt, as opposed to learning to recognize situations where the fear is unfounded, and that the fear is really just a phantom trying to scare you, and that you're in a safe situation where you can go ahead and climb and fall if need be. And so that's a big part of what we're going to get into here today is, through experience and through kind of self-awareness and rational thought, gradually learning to manage fear, not get rid of fear.
So basically,
does that make sense?
Yeah. Basically, when you started to climb, did you experience this fear, or did you experience it when it was a safe falls, or only when it was no fall situations?
Yeah, well, let me give you a little bit of a framework here. Okay, I've been climbing so long. I started in 1977.
Yeah.
So sport climbing, the climbing that you guys do and most people do, where you're clipping bolts and you're sport climbing and you can many times fall safely, that hadn't been invented yet. So back in my day, when I was your age, getting into climbing as a teenager and a 20-something, we had to put in gear, and we still do that on certain climbs. But when you're putting in gear, there's a lot more potential danger there in terms of the falls aren't always safe, and the gear can pull out. And when I bouldered as a youngster, there were no bouldering pads. There was no soft landing. It was like the ground. You hit the ground. And so, the fear was an important part of the equation back then, as it still is now. But I guess what I'm getting at is there were more things to legitimately fear back 35 or 40 years ago, and that luckily climbing has gotten much safer with bouldering crash pads and indoor climbing, and there's all this great new equipment now like gree-grees and different types of belay devices, and of course sport climbs that have a lot of bolts on them can be pretty safe with a few exceptions. And so the sport's gotten more safe, but yet fear is still part of the equation. But I think climbers, as they get experienced, learn to dial back or regulate their fear response. And instead of, they learn to control fear rather than letting fear control them. And so for a beginner getting into the sport, I think you guys have been climbing just a few years. It's natural to go through a period your first few years where you have a fear response in certain climbing situations. And instead of letting it shut you down, you have to learn to kind of dig in and analyze that, what the situation that you're in. And then again, with experience and kind of rational thought and understanding the safety systems that you're using, whether it's a spotter and a crash pad when bouldering, or whether it's, a belay with a sport climb, you need to learn to recognize, okay, this is a pretty safe situation. So I shouldn't be so scared of falling because it's a controlled situation, and odds are, I'm not going to get hurt. But then again, there are situations where, like, if you're hanging upside down on a boulder problem and you might fall onto your head, or if you're sport climbing and the bolts are far apart and maybe the ground or a ledge is in play, well, then that's a situation, of course, that you still need to respect that fear response. So again, I don't coach people to develop a no fear mentality. That would be very dangerous, but instead learn to manage their fears and importantly recognize when the fear is serving them and warranted, and when the fear is, like I said, kind of just a phantom fear that's trying to scare you off what would otherwise be a safe climb. So
yeah, I think this phantom most often appears when you are very beginner and basically you're climbing with beginners on a slabby or 90 degrees walls.
Yeah, pretty much no fall climb.
Yeah, so all the newbies are afraid to fall. There is no safe fall areas, and everybody like, you start to climb.
And you cannot fall, and you overgrip everything, and you cannot learn how to fall because you cannot fall on easy grades, and
so you don't improve your climbing as well, so you cannot climb harder grades, so you're in some kind of newbie circle, newbie bubble.
That's we call that a catch-22, where it's like it's tough to get that experience as a beginner if you're climbing slab routes, which can be, if you fall on a slab route, it might be safe, but you also might flip over or, hit a ledge. And, so that is not necessarily a safe situation to fall. Hopefully the bolts are real close together if you're on a slab. And also if you're a beginner and you happen to have your belayer is also a beginner, well, then you might be having doubts like, can I trust my belayer? Like, are they actually going to catch me so that the fall is arrested? And so, those are natural things you have to work through as a beginner. And that's the beauty of indoor climbing gyms. For climbers listening in who have access to a climbing gym, which has like some lead climbing that they can do that is overhanging, there all of a sudden, that opens the door to one of the techniques to kind of learning to control fear is taking practice falls and doing so obviously in a very safe and controlled setting. So if you have an indoor gym with an overhanging climb, maybe 10 meters high, that you can get up 15 meters, away from the ground, and the bolts are close together and the holds, there's no like large holds you might swing in and hit. Well, in that situation, you could take some short practice falls, like climb up to just so the bolt is at your waist and then let go. And do that a few times, and then maybe climb up till the bolt is at your ankles and then let go and fall. And it'll be scary because it's something you haven't done before, but it's the only way to get over the fear of falling, that really acute, like paralyzing fear, is to fall. You have to get experience at falling. But again, it has to be in a safe setting. And perhaps you've done a little bit of that already or not. But again, practice falls, that's a important learning tool. But again, I have to stress, for beginners, you have to be in the right situation for a practice fall. Obviously, a very trustworthy belayer with a good rope, and it's got to be the right climb where you're going to have an air fall, and also have a belayer that knows how to give you a little bit of a soft catch. You guys did. Let's promote your video you did on the falls and the soft catches. People can go back and find those videos and learn how to be a better belayer and give a soft catch, because that, if you're taking some practice lead falls, it would be nice to get a soft catch, right?
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
True.
So. And talking about gear, someone actually left us a comment that I am not afraid to fall, but I don't really trust the gear. What if the rope gets stuck on the sharp edge and gets cut? And what if the bolt breaks off, etc., etc.? So what
Okay, well, those, you know what, those are common thoughts in the mind of a little more inexperienced climber. If you're on a sport climb at a popular climbing area, the bolts will be placed in a path to prevent the rope from passing over sharp edges. So that shouldn't be a problem. And although there's never 100% guarantee that the bolt won't break, it's extremely rare, like, 1 in a million. Oftentimes, if it's a bad bolt, you can look at it and see, okay, it's really rusty, or maybe when you clip the bolt, you see that the bolt itself moves or the hanger moves. And that even doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad bolt, but it should give you a little pause for analysis. But most popular sport climbing areas, modern areas that are visited by climbers, frequently, the local climbers are stewards. They take care of those routes. And if there's a bad bolt, they replace it. And if there's a sharp edge, then they maybe move a bolt so that the rope won't run over a sharp edge. So, those are legitimate fears. Obviously, if you're climbing a route and you see a razor sharp edge and your rope is running over it, you should take action. You should maybe extend the sling, or maybe even just find a different climb. But that is very, very rare. I mean, I climb hundreds, probably 1,000 climbs a year, and it's very rare that I see, at least on sport climbing, sharp edges. Traditional climbing, if you're venturing up in the mountains and you're putting in gear, well, those routes are less traveled, and because the gear is natural and you have to put it in, then it's impossible to kind of, miss out on all sharp or otherwise dangerous holds like loose blocks. And, that's a whole nother ball game when we're getting into traditional climbing. So I think today we're trying to keep our discussion pretty narrow and focused mainly on sport climbing and bouldering. And so I would tell that person, it's very, very rare that a bolt will break or that a rope will cut. It has happened, but it's extremely rare. And most of the time when you think about that, it's one of those phantom fears that you can, look at the climb and say, wait a minute, the bolts, they're brand new, they're bomb-proof. I don't see any sharp edges anywhere near my rope. Okay, forget that phantom fear. I'm not going to let you scare me. And you put that away.
All right. So
just like another phantom fear, and I have this sometimes, is like I'll be up on a climb and maybe I'm pushing myself to the point that I might fall, and so I'll look down just to kind of make sure, okay, is my belayer watching me? Is he paying attention? I mean, certainly you can do a good job belaying without watching, but it makes the climber feel better when they see the belayer looking up and paying attention. Mm. And so just looking down briefly, and even sometimes I'll say to my belayer, hey, watch me. Just by saying watch me and hearing them say, okay, I'm watching, that lets me eliminate, okay, no phantom fear about the belayer dropping me or something. So little tricks like that where you can just kind of quickly dismiss or distinguish those phantom fears. And then you can push onward with a focused mind. Because, one thing about climbing, especially when you're doing hard moves, like climbing near your limit, you need to have a laser-like focus. You can only concentrate and focus on one thing intensely at a time. So if your thoughts are down thinking about your belayer, or if your thoughts are thinking about, is my rope going to break? Forget it. It makes climbing really hard. I mean, that's when people kind of get paralyzed on a route and like they can't get themselves to move upward anymore because their mind is elsewhere. It's down on the ground with the belayer, or it's thinking other fearful thoughts. And until you can redirect your mind upward on the next move that you have to do, it gets very difficult to advance. And so this is a process that climbers have to work through, and some climbers just for some reason can work through that process in maybe 1 year. Other climbers may take 5 years, maybe more, to kind of learn to process all that information and learn to recognize what are the phantom fears and learn to actively dismiss them when they pop up in your head on a climb and not let them distract you. So again, I like to, tell people that I coach that getting over that paralyzing fear of falling, it's a process. It takes time. And so, every weekend that you go climbing or every season that you grow as a climber, if you're working on it, the fear should be getting less and less, never going away, but it becomes more manageable. And as that happens, you can really climb harder and harder because, the brain is the most important muscle for climbing. And if you're thinking fearful thoughts, well, you can't climb very hard.
Mm-hmm. I remember that we had one comment on our previous videos where one person said that it's impossible to get rid of fears. And he said there are some people who basically can get rid of fear very immediately. So basically they make few falls, then they understand, okay, I can trust the gear, and they just climb their, 5 years of climbing is fearless. And other people, they climb, they understand, okay, the gear is good, but basically when they have a pause of month, they start to fear again. Okay, I'm again very afraid of falling. So do you think there are these two types of people, or that one type can become another?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of layers to this topic. Kind of like an onion, we could peel away a lot of different layers and examine the topic and in a very scientific way if we wanted to go there. I like kind of digging a little bit into the science of climbing performance, but we don't want to go too deep into that because a lot of people just want to know how to climb better. So it's kind of a tightrope I walk in my writing and in my clinics and such. But so yeah, I think everybody is different, and really it comes down to your brain. I mean, we all have different genetics and of course our life experience up to a given point. And some people are a little more fearless than other people are. And scientists have identified the amygdala portion of the brain, which is where your sensory inputs, like what you see when you're climbing or hear, those sensory inputs are processed in the amygdala, and the amygdala then outputs physical responses, like in fearful situations. That fear response, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your pulse rate goes up, your muscles might get tight and you tense and overgrip, like you mentioned. There's this fear response, and it can cascade. Well, they've done studies. They've actually done MRIs of the brain of different people, and even some climbers, a few climbers that they've done. And that fear response, the amygdala portion of the brain, is in people that have trouble with like being hyper fearful. That portion of the brain is really active and really lights up, showing a lot of activity. And maybe if we did an MRI of your brain, Day, we would see that in a kind of fearful situation, that your brain, that portion of your brain, is really processing and outputting all those physical responses to the fear, to the situation. Other people, some of it could be genetic, but I think most of it is probably experiential and changes that occurred in their brain over time. The amygdala is less active, very kind of quiet. Alex Honnold, if you know who that is, he's the famous free solo climber. I mean, he's a great all-around climber, sport climber, trad climber, but he's most famous for his free solo ascents. This past season, he free soloed El Capitan, which is a 3,000-foot granite cliff in Yosemite, and it blew, mind-boggling to do that because one mistake he's dead, right? Because it's free solo climbing, no rope, no partner. So they, some neuroscientists invited him into the lab, and they did a brain MRI on him. They did a few different tests from what I've read. And one thing they did is, I guess a common test to test the amygdala portion of the brain is they show you like shocking images, like just horrible pictures of things. Just use your imagination of what horrible things they could show you. And a normal person, the amygdala gets very active and lights up, and the person starts getting tight and their heartbeat and pulse go up. When they did that test to Alex Honnold, his amygdala was quiet. Like it didn't light up like other people did. Yeah. And it's like, wow, this guy doesn't get scared. That was kind of what the scientists are, or at least he has a very muted fear response. And so I don't think Alex was necessarily born that way. Maybe he's somewhat predisposed to that, but he's been climbing for, I think, 15 years or so, and progressively exposing himself to more dangerous and scary situations through his climbing career. And in doing that, and by playing an active role in managing the fears, kind of like what we've discussed, using different techniques to kind of think about the situation and process the sensory input, his brain has changed. I mean, the brain is not fixed. It's very plastic. In fact, the term is neuroplasticity. Your brain, every day, the things you do, the things you think, your brain is constantly changing. And so the portion of his brain that controls that fear response, I believe, has been conditioned over time. In fact, there's a name that the scientists have for it is extinction, in terms of being able to quiet or even make extinct that fear response. And, I've talked to Alex. He's definitely, he doesn't want to die. And he recognizes scary situations and would feel fear in those situations. But he has learned to be to expertly analyze those situations. In preparing to free solo El Capitan, he went through months of preparation and practicing the climb and mentally climbing the route and envisioning all these different what if scenarios, like what could go wrong when I'm up there and how would I deal with it if I'm free solo. And so by being an active participant in that situation, in processing the sensory input and the data, he's learned to control the fear so that he can perform at an extremely high level in an extremely dangerous situation where one foot slip could be the end. And so again, I think climbers should be empowered to know that their brain, they can change it for the better. And just because you're so scared of falling today doesn't mean you're always going to be that way. If you're willing to work on the process, and there's cognitive ways to work on it, and there's physical ways, like going and taking practice falls. And through those two, and through just years of experience, you will learn to manage the fear and have it kind of be your friend to serve you when you really need a good, wake up. Okay, this is dangerous. Be scared. And to be able to dismiss it or control it when it's not serving you. And, I've been climbing 40 years, and without a doubt, I still have climbs I get on that scare me. And most of the time there's a legitimate reason, like maybe it's a bad fall or something, or climbing from number 1 bolt to number 2 bolt. That's scary. It should be, because if you fall at clipping number 2, you might hit the ground. And so usually when I feel fear, I do pay attention, because as an experienced climber, it's telling me something. And, and sometimes I have those phantom fears too, but not so much anymore.
So what do you do, for example, in a situation where you reach the point where there is no fall zone and the next bolt is very far away, and you're kind of expecting from the route setters that they made this decision to place the next ball far away because it's very easy to climb, but you don't know that. Maybe there is a risk. Maybe you will start climbing and you cannot climb either up or down. So what to do in these situations?
Yeah, now here's where we're starting to get into situations that are tough for me to coach because, every route is different. And certainly there are some climbs like that where, the bolts are 2 meters apart for half of the climb, and then all of a sudden they're 4 meters apart.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Usually, if that's the case, it means that the climbing has gotten easier. And also, if it's higher up on the climb, taking a bigger fall isn't as you're not going to hit the ground if you're up high in a climb. But every climb is a different situation, and that's really where experience comes in. More years of experience, more climbs that you've been on, you get better at analyzing those situations, that looking up and kind of running the calculus in your head in terms of, okay, what if I get up there and fall? What would it mean? Or just knowing how you feel physically, like, do I have enough energy left to get there to the next good hold or next bolt without falling? And so that becomes kind of with experience, it's almost an intuitive thing that you'll have a gut feeling. But as a beginner, you don't have, intuition is based on experience. And so if you're only climbing 1 or 2 years, you can't really have that intuition, or it's not very sharp or crisp in being reliable to give you the best course. So I tell people, when in doubt, down climb. Absolutely. When in doubt, down climb. But on the other hand, if you get up there and you say, okay, it's 4 meters to the next bolt, it looks a little scary to me, but the bolts are good, my rope is good, my belayer is good, the climb is overhung, it's going to be a clean fall, then why not go for it? If you can quickly go through that checklist, and so it's, to some degree, doing that. It's like for a newer climber, it's like taking a bitter medicine. Like, I don't want to do it, but I have to get better.
Yeah.
And that's a situation where even if everybody agrees that it's a safe fall, then you, Ben, as a belayer of Dei, can say, "Hey, go for it. Go for it."
He's keep telling this to me.
Yeah, give the encouragement, and one of two things will happen. Either she goes and climbs to the next bolt, no problem, and she feels, "Hey, I challenged my fear. Yes, I did it."
And then she says, I hate you.
Yeah. Or the other thing is, she might go for it and end up falling. And well, if it's a safe fall, then that's a good learning process, because as we've talked a lot, taking practice falls is essential to really learn, to deal with that fear and to progress as a climber. You have to learn to take safe falls, and just how to control your body when you fall. That takes some practice. Just like being a good belayer and giving that soft catch takes a little practice. And so again, those are all things that in the controlled setting of a climbing gym, you can go and practice 1 day a week. But outdoors also, if it's the right climb, if it's a safe situation.
All right. Do you know the Rock Warrior's Way of Training, the book one? We haven't read that, but many people are asking, what do you think about that?
Sure. It's a good book. It's written by Arno Ilgner. He's a friend of mine. He's a climber about my age. He's been around a long time, and he's written actually 2 books. So the other one is called Espresso Lessons, and they're both good books. I think climbers can gain a lot out of them. The thing about climbing books, obviously they're very heavily based on a person's unique experiences. And so Arno's experience as a climber is different from mine, or from that of a different author. So what I'm getting at is, I think if a climber is really into the sport and wants to really grow, I think they should read everything, because you can therefore get inside the mind of a lot of expert climbers kind of benefit from their experience. And while no single coach or author has the final word or the perfect message, they all have something valuable to offer, I believe. And so I think climbers should have a bookshelf, of books they can read through not once, but also refer back to, because every year that you climb, you may get over one fear, but then let's say you get over the fear of falling, but then as you become more well-known, like you guys being on YouTube, you get more well-known, and then you go to the crag, and then all of a sudden the fear is the fear of like looking bad. Oh, what are people going to think if I fail on this route? So there's different fears, right? There's the fear of falling, but there's the fear of failure and the fear of embarrassment and the fear of getting hurt.
Of cameras.
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot of fears to deal with. And so a good book will be something you can keep referring back to, and the book will grow as you grow. And I should add, in addition to Arno's books, I've written a book, which I know you guys have seen, Maximum Climbing. I call it brain training because I get a lot into the, neuropsychology and neurophysiology. I'm kind of a scientist by trade. So this book is more science-based and certainly a little different than Arno's book, which is, very, very good, but different. And there's a brand new book coming out very soon. The Gimme Craft guys, the Cafe Craft guys in Germany, who published a few training books, they have a new mental training book that I'll promote for them. It's called Mastermind. It was actually written by a famous British climber named Jerry Moffat. He's a climber my age, of my generation. He was a way better climber than me, trust me. But in any case, he wrote this book. I haven't had a chance to read it all, but it's very entertaining. It has lots of neat stories by pro climbers of today, like Chris Sharma and Adam Andra and Alex Megos and Margot Hayes and people like that. So this is a neat book. I think in Germany, it's being released like this Friday, October 20th.
Ooh.
And in America, it'll be released next month, and people can pick up a copy from my website, trainingforclimbing.com. That is if they live in North America. If they live in Europe, like you guys, they should visit the Gimme Craft website, and they can order a copy there. And so there you have a lot of different books to study this winter to help you improve your mental game. But it's a journey. It's a long-term journey. You aren't going to read a book and magically be cured. That's not the way the brain works, and it's just not the way climbing is. It's just like in physical training for climbing, there's no magical exercise. Like you can't just buy a hangboard and suddenly you're going to be an amazing climber. Training is a process, whether it's training your body or training your mind. And so you need to have a long-term perspective and look for a little improvement month over month and year over year, and you will continue to improve long term if you take that perspective. So,
right.
So yes, of course, you improve your climbing and you decrease your fear of falling by practicing, and also by reading books. Maybe you know something about like meditation or other things that could reduce the fear of falling. Are there such type of methods?
Absolutely. And that's what I think, like if you buy Arno's book or my book, Maximum Climbing, there are dozens of mental training exercises. Just like if you buy a book to get stronger physically, there are lots of different exercises that train different parts of your body.
Could you give some
a good book like this gives you a variety of mental training exercises. Meditation would be an obvious one, but there's many other ways of developing self-awareness and thought control, and how to regulate the arousal. I mean, it's all these cognitive skills that you need to develop. Climbing is a complex sport because we have all these physical skills. You need to learn all the moves and how to backstep and drop knee and how to grab holds different ways and climb cracks, and very complex technical skills. And then, of course, you need to get strong. You need to, have strong fingers and have lots of endurance. But mentally, there's many, many skills. Controlling or managing fear is just one subset of those mental skills, but there are many others, like how do I relax myself on a climb, like if I'm over gripping, and how do I visualize to pre-program a climb, and how do I modify behaviors if there's behaviors that are holding me back. I have a whole chapter in here on behavior modification, and there's a number of techniques and tools that you can at home do mental training, specific things to help you modify your behavior, and in fact, as we discussed, change your brain. If you do the mental training exercises regularly over the long term, you will change your brain in a way that will make you a mentally stronger climber. And so, yes, meditation, knowing kind of how to do meditation, how to really quiet your mind, how to make your completely quiet your mind so there's no thoughts at all. Like focus on your breathing. Try to do that. It's hard to, like, even 10 or 15 seconds can be very hard to quiet your mind. And then suddenly something pops into your head, like, oh, I should do this, or something from work or school or climbing pops in. And as soon as that happens, you have to redirect your focus back to your breathing and let the thought go away. And through practice of a simple exercise like that, you will be able to lengthen the time where you can meditate and have a mind free of activity or clutter. And that type of thing, of course, once you get onto the rock, can be very helpful, because then you get to the base of your climb and you have all these crazy thoughts and fears, and okay, I'm going to take a few deep breaths. I'm going to quiet my mind. I'm going to focus on my breathing and almost enter that meditative state. Maybe you won't get your mind completely quiet, because after all, you're at a cliff. But if you can reduce the mental clutter by 90% so that there's just a little bit of mental activity, that then puts you into a really great state to start climbing. And then as you get up the climb, maybe, you start getting that mental clutter and distractions, and you're getting pumped. But if you get to a good rest position, where you can hang on easily or stand on a ledge, you can close your eyes and kind of get yourself centered again and quiet your mind back down. And so that's something that as a climber, and again, I give lots of exercises and techniques to do this, but if you can learn to, as you're climbing, recenter yourself, regather yourself, down-regulate all those physiological affects the amygdala that is making your heart rate go up and your breathing go up and making your muscles get overly tense. If you can learn to down-regulate that in the middle of a climb, like at a rest position, that puts you in a better state to continue onward and not waste physical energy and psychic energy. And it's a complex topic. I mean, that's why I love climbing. 40 years, I'm still excited and I'm still learning, because it is such a complex sport. So you can, the beauty is although you get, most climbers get, improve rapidly the first few years as they learn the techniques, like the climbing techniques. Long-term improvement really is largely about mental training and also becoming stronger.
Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit. What do you think about grabbing the rope while falling?
Never.
Some people say never, some are doing that, and what's your take on that?
If you are clipped into a bolt that is in front of you or above you, so that like the rope is running up through the bolt and down, I suppose maybe you could try to grab the rope, but you're on top rope, so why would you even need to grab the rope in that situation?
I mean grabbing your own rope and when you're falling.
Oh, grabbing like around the knot or right in front of your waist? Yes. Yeah, it's better to keep your hands back. Although it's very, very rare, it's possible if you have a long fall, and when you take a long fall, there can be the rope becomes slack. It's possible the rope gets wrapped around your finger or your hand, and then when the rope comes tight, people have lost like a thumb that way, like literally amputated thumb, because the rope as they're falling gets wrapped around. Just like people who try to grab a quick draw if they're falling, people have been skewered by quick draws where like the gate of the quick draw jabs into their hand or into their arm. So yeah, you really don't want your hands anywhere near the rope or gear. When you fall off as best as you can react, you want to have hands back, and you don't want to be tight. You want to be kind of somewhat loose and pliable, and try to, as the fall is getting caught, have your feet out in front of you. Some falls are more out of control than others, but again, that's where taking practice falls can really help you to learn like the technique so that it becomes intuitive, really, that when you fall, like when I fall now, I don't really think about it. My body just kind of goes into that safe position of hands away from the rope. But I probably in sport climbing take 100 falls a year, maybe more than that. I don't know. If I'm working a hard climb, you can take a lot of falls working the climb. And so again, it becomes second nature. But for a newer climber, you need to get to that point through taking safe falls. But hands away from the rope and kind of learn how to come back against the rock when you're getting caught by the rope. And your video that you did on the falls really demonstrated that nicely. How to how the forces.
Yeah, one thing that I was actually testing is falling with a side swing, and then I noticed that grabbing the rope is helping me a little bit to stabilize myself, and that from that horizontal movement. I'm not sure if that makes any sense or.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you were in a very controlled setting. You're talking about when you were doing the test falls under the bridge.
No, we just went to the gym and I tried to fall maybe 2 meters sideways from the bolt. I was falling and then swinging sideways, kind of running with my feet across the wall. But at the same time, I was grabbing the rope to stabilize myself a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if intuitively that felt better, then maybe it's okay in that situation. But, those diagonal falls when you're to the side of the bolts can be some of the, ones that can be injurious if you get flipped upside down or turn over. So it might make sense to try to grab the rope for stability. But yet I'm very fearful in instructing that to people because, grabbing at quick draws, that's a common one. And I think that's very, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So we had another question. Someone, let's say, had a bad accident and now he's terribly afraid to fall. What can he do to come back and to get rid of these new fears?
Yeah, and that's a common question I get asked. I hear that from people who do bouldering oftentimes. Maybe they fell and broke an ankle, let's say, bouldering. And then they come back from that injury and then they're scared to jump off of boulder problems or fall trying on a boulder problem. And same thing in sport climbing if there's an injury. And that's tough because, your brain makes a connection to an event and an outcome, kind of like a Pavlovian response. You ring the bell and you get a response, or you hear a song and it brings back a memory from back when you first heard that song. And so when you get into a climbing situation where you might fall, you think back almost without hesitation. You reflect back on the fall that got you hurt. So that is a tough one to work through. And it's, again, it's one that people do work through, but it takes time. You're not going to get back in one day or even maybe one season back to the point of having more relaxed ability to fall in those situations. So I think almost like a beginner climber, that person, if they had the accident and got hurt and now they're scared to fall, they almost have to go back to the beginning and have kind of a beginner's mindset. Okay, I need to work through this one step at a time. And if that means going to the gym and doing some safe practice falls, that's it. And it's, again, I would not expect that it's a quick fix. It would be something that takes time, but it can be fixed. Again, your brain can be rewired and is changeable through experience. The more you dwell on that bad experience, the more it becomes solidified in your brain and tougher to break. So the sooner I think you get back on the horse, so to speak, or the sooner you get back out climbing and lead climbing and taking practice falls, the sooner you get back to it and start that working through process, probably the better.
Yeah, I remember when I had this bad accident in Thailand, and then we went to Laos. My first climb took 2 hours. I was basically sitting on the rope all the time and saying, "I'm so afraid to climb. What should I do? What should I do?"
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and you know what? Yeah, and I think all climbers have had a climb like that, where they're just freaked out and they spend more time hanging on the rope than they actually do climbing. And when you find yourself in one of those situations, sometimes it's best to find a different climb, because climbing should be fun. It shouldn't be like pulling teeth, like so scary and painful. And so, being up on a climb and having to hang and think through the process and analyze your fears, whether they're real or phantom, that's good. But if all you're doing is hanging on the route and you're just mortified to move upward, in those situations, it's a battle that I think is best just not even fought. Move on to the next climb, have some fun, because if you spend 2 hours being tortured on the climb, that's no fun, and you're probably not going to make any progress in terms of the situation on that climb. I say find another climb. Get on something easier. One of the best antidotes in climbing, like if you're falling a lot on a climb, or you're frustrated, or you're scared, one of the best antidotes is just getting on an easier climb and winning. Getting on something, even if it's way easier than what you would normally want to climb, get on some easy climbs and win. Meaning go up smoothly, have fun. You and your partner have a good time. And that builds confidence. It kind of clears out your brain and your thoughts. And then maybe the next day you come back and try the other climb again.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree on this. I remember once, and at one of our first climbing trips, I was climbing with top rope. I was terribly afraid to fall, and it was, I think, 5-ish route, European standards, and I was crying on this top rope. So when we went to 3 on the top rope, it was okay, and then I think I started to get better because finally I won something. I climbed the route. So this is a very good advice.
Yeah. I mean, climbing's a process that involves conquering fear and pushing yourself through those barriers. But sometimes you just have to know when to say when and say, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm having no fun. Let's go find something that is easier and I can have fun on. Or maybe just stop climbing for the day. Or some climbers, I say, if they really are having trouble and on a climb and they're frustrated, take a week off. Take a break and come back with fresh mind, fresh body, and it might be a totally different situation then.
Yeah, does your children get afraid to fall? And another question, why usually children are not as afraid as grown-ups to fall? And what changes?
That's a really good question, and that's a rich topic to explore. Kids, especially adolescents, like when they begin puberty, for boys like around age 12 or 13, and then for about 10 years after that until they're 23 or 24 or 25, there's a period there where neuroscientists have recognized that the portion of their brain that kind of assesses risk and the consequences of a situation is not well developed. That prefrontal cortex part of the brain doesn't really become fully developed until maybe as late as age. So for a teenage climber or even a young climber in their early 20s, it can be kind of a little bit of a dangerous period where you don't have good judgment. You don't have good impulse control. I have two teenage boys, age 15, age 17, so they're right in that zone. And I mean, they're terrific climbers and they're terrific athletes, and they're good kids. But I always remind them, and I remind myself and my wife, we talk about, hey, when they're driving the car, don't do anything too crazy. Or if you're going climbing with your friends, you need to really reflect on your experience, because my kids are 15 and 17, but they've been climbing almost their whole life, since as long as they can remember. So they do have a lot of experience in different situations, trad climbing and sport climbing. And so that experience, if they can slow down the thought process in climbing, let's say, and analyze a situation based on their experience, what I've taught them and what they've learned just being a climber for 10 or 12 years already, hopefully they can make good rational choices. But again, that prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until maybe age 25. So and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but from what I've read many times, and I believe has been really well proven in research, is that portion of their brain that controls rational thought and being able to conjure up unintended consequences of an action, it's not there yet. And so I think coaches and parents do need to keep an eye on their kids. Just because they climb 8B plus or Boulder V10 or whatever doesn't mean they have the judgment and the brain power to make the right choices and to not be impulsive or make incorrect snap decisions. And perfection's never attainable for any climber, but it's a sport, because our lives are on the line, that one mistake in the wrong situation can be very costly, ultimately costly. And so I'm very careful with my kids, maybe overly protective when we're out climbing. And so, once you get to be in your middle 20s and you're a more mature adult climber, the combination of that more mature brain and a lot of rich climbing experience in your rearview mirror that you've already accumulated should help you be, a climber that can make a lot of good judgments and a lot of good assessments. And that rational thought and that ability to assess climbing situations is very important for managing fear. I mean, it's all connected, because again, being able to determine whether a fear is legitimate, like I can get hurt in this situation, or phantom or illegitimate, okay, it's a bogus fear, just it's not helping me, it's not necessary. Being able to make that determination requires some wisdom and experience and rational thought. So again, it's a process.
I have one big problem as a person who is really afraid to fall. So basically, when I come to the second quick draw and I can finally reach it, I almost always reach it when it's too high.
Yeah, basically clipping above your head.
Yeah, and I don't understand that I should avoid this, but just what to do when you know that you can't clip already, you just do it. You don't think that, okay, now I should go higher. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, hey, been there, done that. I've done that in the past. And that's where a route, a climb, if it's very well bolted, if like the first ascensionist, the guy who drilled the route, put the bolts in the right spot, usually there's a much better hold if you go a little higher and, the bolt is in a spot that you can climb right up and clip in front of your body and make a much quicker, safer clip. And if you try to clip it early, like you're describing, you might be on smaller holds and your arms are contracting and bent. You're wasting energy, and you have all that extra rope out. If you happen to, your foot pops off while you're pulling the rope, you might hit the ground, right? So that's something, again, that you have to work through. To a climber who has a lot of fear of falling, I understand they want to try to clip the rope up as quick as they can, but that's where, again, you have to kind of using your experience and knowledge, and being of rational thought, recognizing, hey, Day, just climb 2 more moves and it will be a really easy clip than if I clip early, and it will be safer. And that's where your partner can help you out. If they kind of push you, like, just go 1 move higher, go 1 move higher, it'll be a better clip. Because the very, very dangerous, of course, if you fall with that rope out, clipping bolt number 2, you may hit the ground, right? So, and something else, if available, maybe you just stick clip the second bolt. Do you know what a stick clip?
Yeah.
Many sport climbers will stick clip 1 bolt, but if it's a very hard section of climbing or a small clipping hold, maybe for someone just kind of learning to lead or conquer the fear, clip bolt number 2. Better safe than sorry, as the saying goes. Clip bolt number 2, just so that, okay, there's no chance of hitting the ground that way, hopefully. And you can, again, get on to do the climb. And then as you become a better climber, maybe someday come back and do the climb again with just 1 bolt clipped, and you clip number 2, and then you'll recognize that growth.
All right.
But rule number 1, don't get hurt, right? Sport climbing is supposed to be safe. That's my perspective. And so if that means clipping the first 2 bolts to keep it safe, then go for it. And then you come back and do it in better style, maybe 1 year later, and just clip the first bolt, or maybe clip no bolts and climb from the ground in perfect style.
Yeah, we actually have very good question. What are some good questions to ask yourself when determining if a fall would be safe? What kinds of things do you look at when making that decision?
Okay, well, the very first thing is, what is the trajectory of the fall? Like, what is the path that your body is going to follow when you begin the fall, but also as the rope starts to catch your fall and you swing into the rock, what is the path that your body is going to follow? Now, again, doing that calculus and being able to visualize that takes experience, takes practice. So someone who's new to lead climbing just isn't capable of doing that. So that's, again, if you do practice falling in a gym setting and you get experience taking falls outside, over months and years, you will learn to get very good at being able to visualize the trajectory of your fall. And then you have to ask yourself, is there anything I can hit? Will I swing out and hit like an arête or like a corner? Or is there a bulge sticking out that my ankle might hit, or a ledge? So I kind of go through all those thoughts, like, what's the fall going to look like? How is it going to end the fall when the rope is grabbing me? Is it going to be a clean catch, or is there a chance I could hit something? And then, of course, knowing how your belayer is going to belay you on the situation, like in terms of, are they going to give you a really soft belay? Or if there's something that they might hit, 5 meters below, maybe you want a little tighter belay, right? And it'll be a harder catch, which is not ideal. But if it prevents you from falling 2 meters farther and hitting something, then I'll take the harder catch. Again, those are all experience calls, but those are the 2 main things. Assuming, obviously, that you're on a good rope, rope that's not cut or has the core showing through. if you're on a climb that has fixed quick draws, it's important to recognize sometimes on popular routes, the carabiner can get from wear, can get worn down and create a sharp edge that has been known to cut the sheath of a rope. It's rare, but it happens on popular routes. So that's something as you're climbing, especially if you're working a climb and you know you're going to be taking repeated falls, you obviously want to inspect if there's permanent quick draws and carabiners. Are they in good shape, or is it a dangerous looking carabiner that's been worn down? And if so, replace it. Put your own quick draw on there. And so, sport climbing, there's only a few things you really need to assess. Now, traditional climbing, it's a whole nother world because the quality of the gear that you put in for protection can vary from placement to placement. Some pieces are better than others, and even a good piece can pop out sometimes for various reasons. So traditional climbing, there's a lot more to that assessment that we can't really get in here.
Yeah, we have a couple of friends who actually never falls.
Never ever.
They're just so afraid of falling that they don't fall. But they are very good at bouldering and very strong climbers, but they just never fall. How much do you think this affects their top level of climbing, of basically?
Yeah, is there some sort of limit where you can improve your climbing, but without falling, you cannot?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of roped climbing, they're holding themselves back, way back, by not being able to take falls. I mean, again, with regard to sport climbing, falling is part of the game. And to push your limit demands that you put yourself into situations that you're going to fall. Just the process of problem solving a route at your limit is going to require that you go up and fall, just kind of like you would fall off a boulder problem as you're trying to work out the body positions and all the nuance. If you're going up on a roped climb and never falling, you are climbing way below your limit, probably a full number grade. Like if you can climb 7A without falling, you could probably climb 8A. If you project to climb and learn to take falls. And, that's just a rough estimate, but there's a big difference there. And so it's something that is common, especially today. Bouldering is so popular with the climbing gyms and the social scene that a lot of people are just happy being boulders, going to the gym and bouldering and then going outside and bouldering and not having to deal with taking lead falls. And that's fine if that fulfills them to be a boulderer and just push as a boulderer. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. It's totally legitimate. But there's a lot of amazing climbing areas in the world and cliffs and locations that if you never put a rope on, you're going to miss out on. And that's kind of my message to people, is that pursue bouldering. And then when you maybe find you're starting to get a little bored with bouldering, or maybe you're not improving anymore at bouldering, maybe you should at that point broaden your horizons a little bit and start getting into roped climbing and get some new experiences and travel to some new places. And yes, there's absolutely going to be these mental skills that are totally new and unique to rope climbing that you really didn't have to deal with in bouldering. And one of them is this, in addition to the whole falling situation, if you're just doing 5-meter boulder problems, you can just always be kind of in attack mode where you're just on there and you're trying hard and like you just 30 seconds of 100% effort. On a rope climb, that doesn't work, because a rope climb can take many minutes or an hour to climb, perhaps in a very long climb. And so you need to be able to turn on that aggressive attitude and that aggressive way of climbing, maybe on some crux moves within the route, but then you need to be able to calm yourself down and gather yourself and breathe and recover in the middle of a climb while you're hanging on the side of a cliff. And that's something that you never do as a boulderer. As a boulderer, you either do the climb or you jump off and then you walk around and rest at the ground. Learning there's a lot of unique rope climbing skills that will need developed, and mental training skills as well. But again, I think that's the beauty of climbing, is there's always something you can do to take the game to the next level.
So what was the scariest person you coached on fear of falling?
Who overcome his fears or her fears?
That's a good question. I mean, that's tough to answer. I mean, I guess when you climb with family members, I've taken people, relatives or friends who aren't like really into climbing. They want to try it once or twice, like a brother-in-law or somebody like that, or a friend from work that says, "Hey, Eric, can you take me climbing?" And then, of course, they get really scared. It's their first day outside. And usually I take them roped climbing because that's what I enjoy the most. And so, the first day when somebody goes climbing and they kind of get that paralysis, just that death grip sets in, it's tough to enjoy climbing, So I guess in those situations, it's tough because I want them to win. I want them to succeed on their first day climbing and get to the top of something, so they have that feeling of achievement that we love so much about climbing. But yet if they get 5 meters off the ground and just get so frightened they can't move up, then what do? Their first day climbing. So that's a challenging one, because again, there's not a quick fix to that type of reaction. It's a process, as we've been talking about here. So.
Right.
Well, I have maybe one more question. It's sometimes I feel when I start to climb and I feel that, I'm not scared. For example, today is Monday and I'm not scared. And on Wednesday, for some reason, I feel that I'm not scared, but the fear is coming. And are there do you understand that state of mind? And is it possible somehow to control it or to trick your mind to don't let the fear come inside? It's like to hide it somewhere. Don't go here. I close the door.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're maybe describing more is anxiety. Now, it's a kind of maybe a tough distinction for some people, but to me, anxiety is more like just a psychological thing. Like you're thinking about something, and it kind of makes you just uncomfortable, and like but it's all happening inside of your head. That's anxiety, whereas a true fear is a response, a physiological response, like where there's imminent danger, or you're up on the climb and you're getting ready to fall, and all of a sudden your muscles tighten up and the adrenaline is released and you're sweating, and that's true fear, and a fear response, which is different than what you just described, which is more just kind of a mental discomfort, anxiety, just thinking about a climb or thinking about a situation. It could be thinking about something at work, or and so in those situations, I think it's good to try to analyze what you're fearing. Psychologists call this metacognition. Metacognition is simply thinking about what you're thinking about. Okay, so like wow. you have, unravel that a second, but thinking about what you're thinking about. So instead of just kind of feeling this mental discomfort and anxiety, it's like you're going to break down what thoughts led up to that. Like, what were the things that led you to that mental discomfort, to that anxiety? And so by breaking down that thought process, you're then empowered to break the cycle, or to take proactive action. For instance, using a simple tool is self-talk, where you say, to yourself, relax, think about the journey of climbing. Using that voice inside of your head, instead of that voice kind of just chatting away scary things, you take control of it. You take control of that self-talk and say, hey, I am strong, and I can do this. If you're on a climb, talking to yourself in a positive way, kind of being a self-coach. But even at home or in a situation where you have kind of those anxious thoughts, quickly deconstruct them. That metacognition, what led up to it. And sometimes it can be a trigger, like something triggered you, like to think about something, like you heard a voice or you thought of a mental image that triggered the response. And then, of course, if you break that down and figure out what triggered you to kind of become anxious, you can either try to avoid that trigger in the future, or there's even some techniques where you can break that cycle or break that trigger and remove its power over you. Again, those are things that are kind of difficult to describe in a short video, but I'm sure Arno's book and my book both provide tools to go after those situations. So it takes effort. And I know from working with climbers for a long time, if I give them a physical training program to strengthen their forearms or their pulling muscles, they get that. It's something more tangible that they can go and get on the campus board or the hang board or the pull-up bar. And it's easy for them to implement a program because it's something very tangible they're used to seeing people do, or maybe even they've done in the past. But a mental training program, it's more nebulous, right? It's more kind of fuzzy, like, okay, I need to be more positive and I need to control my fear. But those are just general statements. That's not going to really get you anywhere, right? You need to take action, just like those actions that you take in the gym to train stronger muscles. You need to take definitive action to strengthen your mental muscle. Things like taking the practice falls, or like in a good mental training book will have mental exercises that you can do where you can come home and spend 30 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week, and go through a few mental exercises, and actually, keep track of what you do. And like strengthening your muscles, your physical muscles, if you do these mental training exercises on a regular basis, there will be payoffs. But it's hard for some climbers to follow through on because it is a little more nebulous and fuzzy. There's not a hangboard or a pull-up bar for your brain. So you need to. It's a different type of training, obviously. And so some climbers just never go there, sadly. They're happy to do their climbing and their physical training, and they kind of let their brain take care of itself. And that's fine if that's what they're happy with. But I'll tell you, when you learn to really control your brain and have it working for you instead of against you, you will improve. You will break through the plateau. And for many, more expert climbers, they know how to climb. They have good skill. They're strong. They have good strength and power and endurance. That last barrier is often a mental training barrier. Learning to believe in the impossible and challenge those last few fears that might be holding them back, or give up some behaviors that are holding them back in their life. There are things outside of climbing that have kind of exert a gravity on your climbing and are holding you back. And so by recognizing those things and cutting the tethers, you release yourself to get to the next level. And, that's why mental training, it's such a rich topic. It's tough to talk and implement with a more beginner climber. But as you mature and become more experienced, it is a very rich area to go into in terms of taking yourself to the next level and experiencing more in the vertical world. So.
Yeah, makes sense. So we haven't read any books yet, but we will for sure. But maybe you could give your favorite mental exercise. What do you like to do yourself, and what would you recommend?
Right. Yeah, well, I think I guess I probably have two. For one, I'm a pretty high-strung person. I don't know if you know that expression, high-strung, like energetic and fast-paced. I talk fast sometimes, and so it's important for me, especially in performance situations, to be able to slow things down a little bit, relax, let my breathing be more deep, and so being able to lower my arousal level and deepen my breathing kind of just puts me in a better state to perform in climbing. And so closing my eyes and focusing on breathing from the belly, taking those very slow, deep belly breaths, inhaling through the nose, only through the nose, maybe a 7-second long inhale, and let your belly go out and really feel your lungs fill up. Then hold the breath for 2 or 3 seconds, and then do like a 5-second exhale through the mouth, or through the mouth and nose both.
Do you do any of these before you're climbing?
Absolutely. I do that before I climb for maybe 1 or 2 minutes, just to kind of slow things down, clear my thoughts, get my energy level where I want it. But I will also do it sometimes, like if I'm sitting in traffic and I'm like, I need to get, or any situation where I'm feeling kind of tense. If I need to slow things down, if I can close my eyes, or if I can't close my eyes, just taking a few deep belly breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, learning to really fill your lungs completely. Many climbers and many athletes, they breathe shallowly through their chest and rapidly, and that can hold you back in terms of how much oxygen you can get into your blood for your muscles, and just ultimately how well you perform, mentally and physically. And then the other skill, which is crucial, and I use it in all aspects of my life, is visualization. Running through kind of that creating a mental movie of your ascent, initially it might be just kind of rehearsing where you're going to go on a climb, like what holds you're going to grab. That's a very basic mental rehearsal, but true visualization is much more than that. It employs multiple senses, not just your eyes, but getting inside, actually mentally climbing the route from the climber's perspective, seeing the holds as you would see them in your mind's eye, of course, feeling your body turning, feeling the unique body positions. That requires you to practice the climb. So I'm talking about something you would do when you're projecting a climb. But that mental rehearsal, the more you can get your multiple senses involved, the more powerful it is in pre-programming the ascent into your brain. But even just a simple mental rehearsal, like, okay, in my mind, how am I going to drive across the city through the traffic, and kind of being able to see all the right and left turns that you're going to make. That little mental exercise, let's say, is valuable. Teaching yourself how to visualize a course of action. And everybody does that to some degree. Some people in just a very small way, and other people in very great detail. But the more detailed and vivid and accurate the visualization, the more it kind of pre-programs your brain and empowers you to climb better, more efficiently. So there's two for you.
All right. Are you excited to
crush tomorrow? Hell yeah.
So yeah. we've given a lot of information here for people. So maybe if there's a few parts of this video that have really connected with a viewer, they can come back and play it again later when you guys have this posted, and they can kind of re-listen to it and take some notes, and then maybe pick up one of the mental training books to kind of study longer term. So
yeah, all right. So if anyone has any more questions,
you have 5 seconds to write it down.
Wow, we've been talking for over an hour. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully we haven't bored all the climbers so much that we have 0 viewers.
No, people are saying it was great. So
yeah, thanks for you. Yes, thank you. I think we and viewers had a bunch of good advices that at least I am going to try, and I will definitely read one or maybe all of the books. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so thank you, Eric, for chatting with us.
Thank you a lot. Yes,
this was super great, and yeah,
and helpful.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to do it. I've enjoyed the videos you guys have produced the last few months.
Thanks.
You guys are doing a terrific job. Keep at it.
Yeah.
And if climbers want to learn more about training for climbing, or learn more about my books, like is one of them right for you, visit my website. It's www.trainingforclimbing.com. Just spell out the words trainingforclimbing.com. And I post articles there. I do a monthly podcast. If you're into listening to podcasts on your phone or computer, you can subscribe in iTunes to the Eric Hörst Training for Climbing podcast. And then, like everybody, I have a Twitter, a Training for Climbing Twitter and Facebook, and you can follow me there. And I present not only my articles and podcasts, but if there's something out there that another coach has written, or a video that somebody's produced that I think is really neat and beneficial, I'll usually share that and get it out there. Again, I view climbing it's all about bringing people together, having fun, and living life to the fullest. So, and it sounds like you guys are doing that. So good job.
Yeah. So thank you a lot, and thank you for many people are saying thank you to you for coming today.
And so this was our very first show, and we hope in the future we will have more of such shows where the great climbers and climbing coaches like Eric will have an hour 23 minutes to talk. So
yes, Steve, you're next.
So
that's great. Well, listen, now it's time for me to go work out. So it's been a pleasure talking to you guys from Pennsylvania in the eastern United States. We're probably 5,000 miles away from each other, right? So that's cool. Yes, the technology is bringing people together.
Yeah, just like climbing.
Just like climbing.
Okay, so thank you. Enjoy your climbing, and talk to you next time, maybe on another topic.
Or maybe we'll meet. Who knows?
For sure.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
All right.
Are we still on camera?
Yeah, we are still on camera.
So guys, thank you a lot for watching us, and we hope you really enjoyed this video. We were a bit nervous because
I'm still nervous because she has fear of falling and I have fear of cameras.
That'll be the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Controlling the fear of cameras. Yeah. Well, listen, it was great talking to you guys. Let me know when you have the video posted, and I'll help circulate and promote it for you. And we can do it again sometime soon.
Okay. Right. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Are we now still on camera?
Yeah, if you want to say something, you can.
I just wanted to say that if you like this show, you should
hit the like button.
Hit the like button, subscribe. If you didn't like it, smash it twice. Anyway, just stay tuned because we have a list of really good climbers and climbing coaches who might be on his show, on our show in the very near future. So stay tuned, and in the meanwhile we'll try to do as much fun and good content videos.
And
as
finally
possible.
edit a lot of stuff that's waiting to be edited.
Yeah.
We're actually working on more Fear of Falling videos, and we still have to edit videos from the last trip. We went not only to Tonsai, but Laos as well, and another place in Thailand, and I have a lot of footage that's waiting to be edited.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of stuff to do.
A lot of stuff to do, but we say that fear of falling topic is the most important for you, so we try to do more fear of falling videos and some travel videos. But if you have other ideas for other type of videos, or
like nutrition videos, as Steve is saying.
Hi Steve.
Yeah, Steve is here. Steve Townshend, shout out to you. The guy who climbed the hardest route in Thailand.
Yes.
Is right now in the chat.
And he might be in our show soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not spoil. And I think we are talking already a little bit too much. So maybe it's time to go to sleep.
Wrap this up.
Yeah, to wrap this up.
Yeah, and also, if you guys want to support us, we will put the link in our Patreon somewhere. And
yeah, in the description. So if you like this show or our videos, or basically anything we do, we really appreciate all the Patreons who support us. And
because it just basically shows us that you guys like it, and it's worth for us to continue doing this, because YouTube doesn't pay us much at all, and we're basically doing all of this almost for free. The gear and driving and all the stuff cost much more than we're earning from a little of YouTube AdSense.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun, so we'll keep doing this. It's always nice to see that somebody is supporting what you do. And that we are not doing this only for our sake. Anyway, that's it. We're talking too much. Thank you once again. Have a good night or a good day, depending where you live.
And we go do pull-ups.
And we go to pull-ups, right? 40 today, right?
Yeah, I did 5 so far.
I did 0 so far.
I need to do a lot of more.
Let's go. Stop speaking. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, all. Where is that stop streaming button? Ciao.
Ciao.